Every Sunday without fail, Margaret Harper packed the same things into her old canvas bag: a pair of clean gloves, 2 containers of homemade chili, and a small worn notebook where she wrote down the names of every person she met at the downtown shelter. She had no obligation to be there. She wasn't paid. She wasn't famous. She just believed that people deserved to be seen, even when the rest of the world passed them by. To most, Margaret was just another volunteer in a sweater and scarf ladling soup and offering blankets. But to the men and women who came in from the cold, she was the one who remembered their names. The one who said things like, "I saved your favorite today," or "You looked stronger this week." People listened when she spoke, because she spoke gently. No judgment, no pity, just care. Margaret had started volunteering 5 years ago, right after her son Tyler had stopped answering her calls. At first she thought it was the usual teenage rebellion. He was 18 and restless, trying to find himself. But months turned into a year, then 2, then 5. No texts, no birthday cards, no messages. Friends told her to let go, that maybe he didn't want to be found. But every Sunday she came to the shelter. Part of her hoped that maybe, just maybe, she'd find a clue, a whisper, a shadow of him somewhere. She never said this out loud, not even to the other volunteers. It was her quiet ache, one she carried like a folded note in her heart. On this particular Sunday, the air was cold and sharp. The shelter was already filling up by the time Margaret arrived. She tied her apron, smiled at the new faces, and began her routine. "Hi there, I'm Margaret. Would you like some chili today?" She recognized most of the regulars: Harold, with the limp; Denise, who always asked for extra salt; Rudy, who used to be a jazz musician. But then she spotted someone at the very back of the line. Head down, thin hoodie, torn sneakers, and something in her chest skipped. The way he stood, the curve of his jaw, the way his fingers fidgeted with the drawstring of his hoodie. It couldn't be. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed out a bowl to the next person. The line moved slowly. The boy moved with it, closer, step by step. And then he looked up, just for a second, and Margaret felt the world go quiet, because it was him, Tyler, her son. For a heartbeat, Margaret stood frozen. The ladle in her hand hovered midair. The sounds of the shelter murmurs, footsteps, metal spoons clinking faded into a distant hum. Her eyes locked onto the young man's face, Tyler's face, thinner now, paler. Hair longer, his jaw rough with stubble. His eyes, tired, older than they should be. But it was him, her son, the boy she used to sing to sleep. The teenager who stormed out with a backpack full of anger and silence. The man she had prayed for every night for 5 long years. And now, he was standing in line for food. Her heart twisted. She wanted to scream, to run to him, to throw her arms around him and never let go. But instead, she did the hardest thing she'd ever done. She said nothing. She took a slow breath, steadied her shaking hand, and whispered to the next guest, "Would you like some cornbread with that?" When Tyler reached the front, he barely looked at her. "Chili, please," he muttered. Margaret nodded, trying to keep her voice calm. "Of course," she said softly. She ladled the chili, carefully placed the bowl on the tray, and then in the gentlest tone she could manage, added, "I saved the good batch for you." Tyler blinked just for a second, then nodded, once took his tray, and walked away. He didn't recognize her. Or maybe he did, and didn't want to. Margaret watched him sit in the farthest corner, his back against the wall, eating slowly, head low. Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She had work to do. When her shift ended an hour later, Margaret quietly stepped outside the shelter's back door and leaned against the brick wall. The wind bit through her sweater, but she didn't care. Her mind was racing, heart pounding. Was that really Tyler? Was he homeless? How long had he been like this? And the heaviest question of all, should she say something? She didn't want to embarrass him or make things worse. but she couldn't just let him walk away again. That night, she sat in her kitchen long after dark, staring at the phone. She had no number to call, no address to visit, but she had a plan. The next Sunday, she packed an extra container, not chili, just homemade macaroni and cheese, Tyler's childhood favorite, and a small note inside that read, "If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No questions, just love. Mom." She didn't even know if he would come back, but she brought it anyway and waited. Sunday came again. Margaret arrived at the shelter earlier than usual, heart pounding with every step. She set the macaroni container in a brown paper bag, tucked the note inside, and placed it behind the counter where she served meals just in case. As people began to line up, she scanned the crowd, but there was no sign of him. She smiled at everyone who came through. She asked names, offered seconds, and laughed at Rudy's usual jokes. But all the while, her eyes kept drifting to the door. Minutes passed. Then, an hour. She felt hope dim bit by bit, until just before the meal shift ended, he walked in. Tyler, same hoodie, same eyes. Margaret didn't move. This time he looked straight at her, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. She gave a small smile. "Mac and cheese today," she said gently. He hesitated. "Yeah." She nodded. "Someone said it was your favorite." Tyler looked down, then up again, his voice quiet. "You remember that?" Her heart cracked a little. "I never forgot." There was a pause, long, still heavy. Then he whispered, "Hi, Mom." The air around them changed. No one else in the shelter seemed to notice. But to Margaret, the moment rang louder than 1,000 reunions. She reached beneath the counter and pulled out the paper bag, held it toward him. Tyler took it slowly, staring at it like it was some kind of fragile treasure. Then he stepped aside, to the corner of the room again, and opened it. She watched him from a distance, unsure what to do, unsure if she should follow. But before she could move, Tyler stood up and walked back toward her. His eyes were red. He held the note in his hand. "I didn't think you'd want to see me," he said. Margaret looked at him, tears welling up. "There wasn't a single day I didn't want to," she whispered. Tyler looked down. "I messed up." She shook her head. "I don't care. I just want to know you're okay." He shrugged. "I'm not really, but this helps." For the first time in years, she reached out, and he let her place a hand gently on his arm. It was small, but it was something. That Sunday night, Margaret didn't sleep much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Tyler's face, older, weary, but still her boy. She replayed every word, every glance, every pause. It wasn't the reunion she had dreamed of, but it was real, and it gave her hope. The following Sunday, she brought 2 thermoses of tea instead of 1. And when Tyler walked in this time earlier than before, she greeted him with a smile and said, "Want to sit outside for a bit after the meal?" He nodded, "Sure." After serving the last guest, she slipped off her apron, grabbed the tea, and met him at the back steps of the shelter. They sat side by side, in silence, at first watching the clouds drift across the pale blue sky. Then quietly she asked, "Where have you been all this time, sweetheart?" Tyler didn't answer right away. He took a long sip of tea, then finally said, "Everywhere, nowhere." Couch to couch at first, then the street. Tried to stay clean. Didn't always win. Margaret didn't flinch. She didn't scold or cry. She just listened and nodded. Sometimes he continued, "I thought about calling, but I didn't want to hear disappointment in your voice." She looked at him with full eyes. "You would have only heard love, maybe a little worry, but never disappointment." He swallowed hard. "I messed things up back then, Mom." Margaret reached over and gently touched his hand. "We all mess things up, but you came back. That matters." They sat for nearly an hour, sipping tea, letting time mend what it could. And when it was time for him to go, she reached into her bag and handed him something small, a folded scarf. "It's going to get colder next week," she said. Tyler took it, his eyes soft. Thanks. He hesitated, then leaned forward and hugged her. Not long, but tight and real. Same time next Sunday, he asked quietly. She smiled, holding back the tears. I'll be here. The weeks that followed felt like waking from a long dream. Every Sunday, Tyler came to the shelter, not just for food, but to see her, to sit and talk. Some days they spoke about nothing at all. Old memories, silly childhood moments. Other days, they sat in silence, just grateful to share the same space again. Each week, Margaret noticed small changes. Tyler's posture straightened. He started helping carry food trays, picking up empty dishes, even offering a blanket to a man shivering in the corner. He didn't call it volunteering, but Margaret saw it, the kindness coming back into him. The heart she always believed was still there. One Sunday, Tyler lingered longer than usual. They stood outside the shelter. After their tea, the wind sharp and the sky gray. I've been thinking, he said, rubbing the edge of his scarf. I want to get a job, even part-time. Something. Margaret's heart swelled. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I can help. He shook his head gently. I want to do it on my own. I don't even have an address. She paused, took a breath. My guest room's still empty, she said. Tyler looked at her surprised. You'd let me stay. You're my son, she said softly. Of course I would. I don't want to be a burden. Margaret smiled. You're not a burden. You're a blessing I never stopped praying for. He didn't answer at first. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, maybe just for a little while. That night, Margaret changed the sheets in the spare room. For the first time in 5 years, she opened the closet, still filled with some of Tyler's old things, faded shirts, a dusty basketball, a photograph of them at a state fair. She sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, thank you to no one in particular, to God, to fate, to whatever brought him back. Because what once felt like a lost cause now felt like a second chance. The first night Tyler came home with her, Margaret made spaghetti, the same way she used to when he was in high school. He ate quietly at first, then smiled mid-bite and said, you still put too much garlic. She laughed. And you still complain, even though you love it. For the first time in years, the kitchen felt alive again. The next morning, she found him sitting at the table flipping through job listings in the local paper. She didn't interrupt, just poured 2 cups of coffee and set one beside him like old times. Little by little, routine crept in. He helped with groceries, took out the trash, even fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom. Margaret didn't ask questions about his past. Not yet. She knew some things needed time, space. What mattered now was the present. That Sunday, they went to the shelter together. At first, Tyler was hesitant. I don't want people thinking I'm still there for a handout, he said. Margaret placed a hand on his arm. Then, let them see what you're giving back. He agreed. And when they arrived, something shifted. Tyler didn't just serve food. He laughed with the guests, gave advice to a young teen who reminded him of himself. He even found a quiet moment to sit with Rudy the jazz musician and listen to his stories. At one point, another volunteer, James, nudged Margaret and said, that new guy's good. You bring him. She smiled, eyes twinkling in a way. That evening, Tyler sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. Margaret joined him, a blanket over her lap, tea in her hand. I've got an interview this week, Tyler said, glancing sideways. She turned to him slowly. Where? Maintenance at the community center. It's not much, but it's something. Margaret reached out and squeezed his hand. It's everything. He looked down, then back up at her. I don't know how to say this without sounding stupid, but thank you, Mom, for not giving up. She blinked back tears. You came back. That's all I ever wanted. And in that moment, under the soft evening light, 2 hearts that had wandered far from each other finally found their way home. Together, Tyler got the job. Margaret cried a little when he told her, but he didn't mind this time. He even smiled. For the first week, He worked in silence, cleaning floors, replacing light bulbs, organizing storage rooms. But by the second week, he started saying hello to people. By the third, he was joking with the kids at the after-school program. One afternoon, a boy named Leo tugged on his sleeve and said, "You're the guy from the shelter, right?" Tyler nodded. "You helped me carry my tray once," the boy said proudly. I remembered. That moment stuck with him because it meant something. It meant he'd left a mark, even when he felt invisible. At home, Margaret noticed the changes too. He walked taller, spoke more, laughed easier. He even started texting her. While at work, little things like, "They ran out of paper towels again," LOL, or "Kid said I look like a ninja janitor today." They weren't big conversations, but they were beautiful because they were normal. One Sunday after the shelter shift, a woman approached them. She was in her early 40s, holding the hand of a shy, quiet boy. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you the one who used to, be here?" Tyler nodded, unsure where this was going. She smiled gently. "My son's struggling. He doesn't talk much, but he watched you today. Said you're strong." Tyler blinked. "Strong?" She nodded. "He said if you could come back from whatever you went through, maybe he could too." Tyler looked down at the boy, then back at the woman. "I'd be happy to talk with him, anytime." And just like that, Tyler became more than a worker. He became a mentor, a quiet example, proof that broken roads can still lead somewhere good. That night, as they sat at the dinner table, Margaret pulled out something from the drawer. It was the small notebook she used to carry every Sunday, the one filled with names. She flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Sunday, Tyler Harper, volunteer teacher's son." She passed it across the table. He stared at it for a moment, then smiled and wrote beneath her words, "Coming home." Months passed. Winter melted into spring. The shelter remained part of their routine. But now they weren't just visitors. They were family. Tyler organized a coat drive. He repainted the dining hall. Kids at the community center started calling him Mr. T. And every Sunday, like clockwork, he and Margaret stood behind the food counter, side by side, serving bowls and offering smiles. People who once looked down now looked up to him because he had been there. And he came back. One afternoon, as they were closing up the shelter, Director pulled Margaret aside. "Your son," she said, "has become a light in this place." Margaret looked over at Tyler, who was helping a guest fix a broken shoelace. She smiled. He always was. He just needed time to shine. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, Tyler stood by the porch railing, gazing at the soft amber sky. Margaret joined him with 2 cups of tea, one for her, one for him. He took a sip and said, "I've been thinking of going back to school." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Yeah," he nodded. "Social work, or maybe counseling. I want to help people like the ones I used to sit beside." She placed a hand over her heart, full of quiet joy. "That's beautiful, Tyler." He smiled. "You helped me find my way, Mom. You didn't scream. You didn't chase. You just waited and loved." She looked at him through misty eyes. "I never stopped being your mother, not even for a second." That night, Margaret slipped a fresh page into her notebook and wrote, "Healing doesn't always happen in hospitals. Sometimes it begins with a bowl of chili." A word remembered, a mother's quiet faith. And underneath, Tyler added, "You don't have to fix the world all at once. Sometimes it starts with one Sunday, one name, one open door." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us about a second chance in your life or someone who never gave up on you. And we'll see you in the next story, right here on Life Plot Twist.